Okay, good morning all and welcome to our training session. This is from the South African Oracle User Group. It's a free online training session. We are fortunate. We have local experts that are allowing us their time to make sure that we are getting skilled up during this period that we are sitting in. So instead of us worrying of things we can't control, we as a South African Oracle User Group have teamed up with local experts to make sure we can provide the skills necessary for you to enhance and do your job. So today we're going to be discussing Oracle DataGuard. And before, so the program will go on that the person doing the presentation is a very highly skilled Oracle professional called Ian. He will introduce himself just now. And we're going through no sales, but just purely technical. And how can you set up your DataGuard at the office? Just to give you brief background, I strongly suggest the use of DataGuard. It's an excellent tool. I've been using it at multiple clients around South Africa and Africa, and they all appreciate the features of the tool. Before we go ahead, once everything clears, we are planning a conference in Cape Town. And that conference will be the 9th and 10th of November in Stellenbosch at the Lord Charles. But seeing that we are living day by day now, that's a bit far. Let's go back to our program agenda and let Ian take us through the DataGuard journey and skills transfer. Ian, you can now share your desktop. I will put myself on mute and manage the participants. People, when you enter the room, you will notice there's a poll. Please fill out the poll. And yeah, we are already sitting at around 40 people. Excellent. Ian, you can proceed.
Cool. Thanks, Ahmed. Can I just ask you to make me a co-host?
I don't see the option to make a co-host, but you can share your screen and proceed.
Okay. Can I also just ask you to, there should be an option to mute all of the participants on entry instead of you having to do it manually yourself.
Okay,
so if you just have a look for that. Okay, let's just do this and pick the right desktop. And there we go. Okay, so thank you and good morning, everybody. I would argue whether or not I'm a highly skilled professional. I know enough about how to break things. So if that's a highly skilled professional, then yes, that's me. My name is Ian Bogart. I'm a solution engineer at Oracle, but most of my career has been spent in the trenches as an Oracle DBA, and I've got the battle scars to prove it. But today we'll be talking about DataGuard, which is a technology, as Ahmed has alluded to as well, which in my personal experience has proven to be life-saving on more than one occasion. Okay, so that's just our safe harbor statement. As usual, fortunately, I'm not covering anything about the impending release of 20C, so I can't be held accountable. I'm only going to be speaking about the existing technology that we can use in the year now. Okay, so let's start with the concept of MAA, which is Oracle's best practice blueprint for customers to achieve optimal high availability, data protection, and disaster recovery at the lowest cost and complexity. So this diagram that we see on the screen shows the various tiers of MAA, starting at the most basic, which is bronze, and each level then includes additional capabilities, but includes the capabilities from the previous level. And this diagram then just simply expands on the previous one, outlining the capabilities included and required at each level. So we're going to be looking at DataGuard today, which is in the gold category. And as a matter of interest, can we just show the results of the poll now, Ahmed?
Sorry, I was on mute. People are still filling it in as they enter.
Okay, so let's go on. There's another section just before
Yeah.
I actually start where we can show those results. That's fine. All right. So why do we need to have disaster recovery in the first place? You may ask yourself. Well, as a start, you never really know. Sorry, skipped off. You never really know when an alien invasion is going to happen. So I don't know if you can see where the arrow is pointing. We've got a little painted black. I think that's probably a version 1 Exedator machine there supporting the Avengers.
Vending
And
machine.
you also never know when a villain is going to be blowing up your primary location using missile firing helicopters. Okay. So if that happens, will your business be able to continue? Will you be like Tony Stark and find what you need in a news van? You never know. All jokes aside though, in this day and age, we are literally part of a global ecosystem. And businesses need to be able to deliver their services around the clock, 24/7. So it's an important part of the service rendered by IT. Okay, so this is going to be where I'm going to do most of my talking. And let's talk about some of the basic DataGuard concepts. So we'll start off with the primary database, okay? And this can either be single instance or rack. From there, we have a standby database, which again can be single instance or rack, regardless of what the primary has been configured as. There are 3 standby databases, and the most common being a physical standby, which is a block-for-block replica of primary and applies redo from primary. A logical standby can apply changes from production using a mechanism called SQL apply. And this can be used to have a standby that's slightly different from primary and is particularly useful during upgrade scenarios. But that's a discussion for a whole other time. Perhaps you can schedule something around upgrades. A snapshot standby is a physical standby where you stop redo apply for a short period of time. You open up the physical standby in read-write mode to allow for potentially pre-production testing, and then you convert it back to a physical standby. You also have the DataGuard broker, which is a management framework that automates and centralizes the creation, maintenance, and monitoring of DataGuard configurations. If you're using Oracle Enterprise Manager, by the way, and you want to receive notifications around some of the DataGuard specific metrics from OEM, you need to have the broker enabled. It's not mandatory, but it's highly recommended. In terms of DataGuard services, we have redo transport services that does exactly what it says. It transfers redo data from the primary to the standby databases, but also manages the process of resolving gaps in archived redo logs in the event of a network failure. Apply services, again the same, it applies redo data on the standby database. And as I mentioned before, we have redo apply for physical standby databases and SQL apply for logical standbys. So when we talk about role transitions, that refers to the process of changing a database from primary to standby or vice versa. This is done either by a switchover operation, which is typically a planned downtime slot. If you guys are planning a maintenance window every Thursday to test your business continuity processes, switchovers are planned role reversals. And the failover is what's happened when the helicopters have flown over and your primary site is lost and you need to restore service to the business. Last but not least, we also have 3 protection modes that DataGuard can run with. Maximum availability provides the highest level of data protection without compromising the availability of the primary database. So max availability will attempt to write the data to the standby database synchronously, but will switch to async if it's unable to do so. Max performance, which is the default, provides the highest level of protection without compromising the performance of your primary database. So whereas max availability and max protection, which I'll get to now, both write by default in synchronous mode, max performance writes the redo asynchronously. And then finally, max protection is the most hardcore and ensures no data loss. Redo data is written and confirmed at both primary and standby before a transaction is confirmed as committed. And if it can't do that, it actually shuts down your primary instead of continuing to process transactions. That's why I say it's the most hardcore. So that one you would typically do if you are serious about not losing data, but it's highly suggested to at least have 2 standby databases in that configuration. Okay, so this diagram, I'll talk you through a very simplified DataGuard architecture. We have our primary database, we have our standby database, and these should ideally be located in geographically distant data centers, okay, or in completely separate data centers. The primary will send redo to the standby, and if you want real-time apply, standby redo logs will have been configured, and the redo information is written to those standby redo logs. The redo is then applied to the standby database, and the broker would have been configured to simplify administration of the configuration. So this is a quick overview, and as much as Ahmed said it's not a sales pitch, I've got to throw something in here every now and then. So this is a quick overview of the environment that we'll be using today. I've configured 2 database virtual machines in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. In our Frankfurt region, we've got a region coming to South Africa later on in the year. And for the purposes of this demonstration, these are all located in the inner yellow block in a public subnet. Okay, so we can reach that from anywhere in the world. But of course, you wouldn't do that for any of your production environments. It's only for this demonstration. Okay, this is located in Frankfurt, and I've done a couple of runs through. The connectivity is not a problem, and we'll see that as we're building the environment in a couple of minutes. The important thing I just want to mention here is a concept that isn't, I think, effectively used, but it's extremely valuable, and that's the concept of a service. Okay, so we'll be configuring the service, which is what our users or applications will be connecting to, and it's the service which will be available for connections depending on which of those 2 databases that I've configured, or we'll configure SAOUG GHB, which is for Johannesburg. The applications will connect to the service. So if CPT is primary, it'll connect there. If Johannesburg is primary, all of the applications and connections will connect there. Let me actually just show you my TNS names entry. Okay, so you should be able to see that now. So that's a sample of the TNS names entry that you would typically use in the scenario. We've got our 2 hosts in our DataGuard configuration, one for primary, one for standby, and that is the service name that we'll be connecting to. So this service will be started on whichever of those 2 hosts is primary. And guys, please feel free, if you guys have any questions at any point in time, please interject. You don't have to wait until the end. We can cover those as we go along. Okay, let me just move my window back. Okay. Right. Ahmed, can we do the results of that poll quickly?
Yeah, sure. Can you allow me to share my screen there?
Sure, just give me a second.
So people, these are the results of the poll that we sent out to everyone. We just asked 2 questions. The one question was, what technology do you use to satisfy your disaster recovery requirement? And DataGuard seems to be the highest. So we got the DataGuard. Some people use storage-based application, and about 5 asked, why do we need DR? Right? So
can you put that poll on the screen so everybody can see?
Oh, where is that? Sorry. I'm just busy. I thought I shared my desktop. Let me just share.
We can see it, but the poll itself is not on the screen.
Can you see it now?
I don't see it, not yet.
Okay, I am sharing my whole desktop. Okay.
Okay, it's fine.
But I'll just go through.
Sure.
So what people are saying is with DataGuard, a majority of people are using DataGuard, but about 40% are using storage-based replication. And about, should I say, 10% are using are not using anything. What version of the database? About 40% are using 12.2, and then it fizzles out between 12.1, 11, 10. There is about 4% that are already using 19C, 18C. There is about 12% there as well. So that is the results there.
Okay, that's actually quite heartening to know. I can understand that there'd still be some 11.2s, but 10.2s. Ah, there we go. You can see it on the screen now.
Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, so just to go through everything, there you can see the majority of them are using DataGuard. Should I say 60%? 24% are using storage-based replication. I just want to give my experience that, I don't like speaking about customers, but we visited a customer that used storage-based replication, and unfortunately, it wasn't certified by Oracle, and the customer thought it was working, but it wasn't working. So people make sure that whatever solution you use is certified by Oracle, and as well is do multiple tests. I mean, try to do as many tests as you can, use different scenarios. We visited a client, and the client said he used some kind of storage-based replication, and guess what? It wasn't working. But fortunately, there were some backups on Armin, and we could recover. But yeah, so make sure that whatever technology you use is certified with Oracle. Then what is the primary version of the Oracle database people are using? And there we go. So it's a multiple spread, but majority are using 12.2. There we go. That's all from the poll. So Ian, you can carry on.
Yeah, you can give me the sharing capability again.
Okay. No, you can share. You can share.
Okay, cool. Right. So everyone, I mean, that's really awesome. I just want to echo Ahmed's sentiment in the sense of using storage-based replication, and it's perfectly plausible. There are scenarios where it might be valid to use that. The problem with storage-based replication is that a lot of times it gets implemented and you sort of think, oh, well, it's working, so we don't need to test it. And then when the helicopters fly over, it's a problem, right? When you actually need to, when you in crunch time. So the advantage of DataGuard is that you have visibility into whether or not your standby database is healthy or not. You can use it for other things as well, but I'll speak to those points a bit later on. But for me, that's one of the biggest advantages, that you can have some sort of sense of assurance that your DR, your disaster recovery strategy is healthy. Okay, so most of the people were on 12.2. That was great. Some on 11.2 and some on 10.2. Unfortunately, for everybody below 12.1, I am using functionality that is available in 12.1 and higher. Okay, so that's the Metalink or the My Oracle support. Sorry, you can see how old I am when I say Metalink. That's the My Oracle support note that I'll be using today in terms of the steps. So please do attempt to push for upgrades to a later version, because it goes without saying, with each new release, there are enhancements and improvements to make our lives easier as DBAs, right? Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. I've got two tabs open here. One is for the window which will represent the Johannesburg region in this example. This is the tab where I've got my Cape Town region, which is the primary at this point in time. So please forgive me, I have a tendency to sort of fly through very quickly with a keyboard. So if I am going too fast, please just interject. But let's start off with the primary. Need to connect as an article user. I just want to give you guys some background around this information, around these two hosts. So I said that these are database virtual machines in the Oracle Cloud. We are running grid infrastructure 19. Okay, so by default in OCI, when you provision a database environment, regardless of the database version, grid will always be at the latest supported version. So grid is running at 19. Our database version is 12.2. We've got ASM configured on this environment. We've got two disk groups. We've got the same disk group on both sides called data. I've decided to throw a little bit of a mix into the equation because I'll be talking a little bit about ASM and article managed files, the benefits of using that. So I've got Rico CPT on this host. On the other host, it's called Rico JHP. So let me just connect and show you that. Rico JHP. Okay, so if anybody's ever used ASM CMD, I love that you always have to learn. You continue learning no matter how long you've been around for. I only discovered this privileged sysdba functionality yesterday for the first time, because this is a role separated environment. So you've got a grid operating system user for grid infrastructure, and Oracle, we've got for the Oracle database software, we've got the Oracle user, right? Whenever I needed to use ASM CMD, by default, ASM CMD tries to connect a sys ASM. So I used to, because I didn't know any better, right? I used to have to disconnect this to Oracle user, reconnect this grid user, run ASM CMD, find the information that I needed, disconnect from grid, go back to Oracle. I hated it. But I actually discovered that you can do this as the Oracle user and then specify, I actually only want to connect the sysdba. I don't need to connect the sysASM. And it actually allows you to do that. So it should make your life a little easier. Right. The first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be configuring our database. It's actually config DB. And a prerequisite that you need for DataGuard is you need to enable force logging, okay, on your database. That is to ensure that any transactions that are executed in no logging mode, because remember, DataGuard is all about shipping redo. So you cannot have transactions that ship, or you cannot have transactions that run with no logging, because otherwise you run the potential for missing data, right? So you need to enable force logging at a database level. That automatically overrides anything that might be written in code where it's been hinted to use no logging, but that is a prerequisite. The next thing that I'm doing is I'm enabling database flashback, okay? That is optional, but highly recommended. And it's useful outside of DataGuard as well. But in a DataGuard scenario, it's very useful, especially when you've got large databases that you've got standbys for. If there's some sort of reason you want to use snapshot standbys, or you need to reinstate your primary, flashback is going to save you a lot of time. And also, just to mention, the Mars note that I referenced, I'm following the steps from that Mars note, but I've sort of categorized and grouped some commands together. It's just my own. For me, it's a bit easier that way. You have a tendency to forget things as time goes on. Okay, step 2 is we need to add standby redo log files to the primary. And as I mentioned, this is important if you want to do real-time apply. Okay, so as the redo gets sent from your primary, it gets written to the standby redo logs. And of course, you need to have it on both sides in the event that there's going to be a role reversal. So I'm adding it to the primary database now because the standby database is going to be an exact replica of our primary. So by adding the standby log files now, they will exist on the standby when it gets built. And of course, it needs to be the same size as the current redo log files. Okay, and the next step is I'm just setting a couple of parameters. So I'm setting standby file management to auto. the file client and file server parameters speak to the fetch archive log process. And that is one of the redo transport services. If there's a gap in the archive logs, if you've put your standby database into a snapshot standby mode, as an example, you've left it there for a week, archive logs are missing on the standby side, these parameters actually then go and facilitate the coordination to say, where do I need to go and fetch the logs from? Okay, and that's the end of step one. The next one is we are going to configure RMAN. And there's two reasons why I'm doing this. The one reason is just to make sure that the process of actually creating the standby is going to be quicker. And that's why I'm enabling a parallelism of 4. Okay. The next one I'm actually doing a little bit earlier, but again, I'm doing this a little bit out of sequence because I want to categorize and group all of the commands together. So I'm doing this now, and this is a very important setting that needs to be configured on the RMAN side. And it basically says that do not delete any of my archive logs until they've been applied on the standby. You do not want backup processes, which you can run on the standby database, to delete archive logs if they haven't already been applied on the standby database, okay? Because then you potentially have gaps. You need to go and fetch the logs from primary if they don't exist in primary. There's a couple of options that you can do. You can either restore them, or you can use mechanisms in 12.1 and higher to roll the standby database forward using a backup. Okay, the next step that we have to do is we have to copy our password file. So because we are using ASM, come on.
Ian, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
The RMAN warning that you're seeing there?
Yes. It's because there isn't a standby database configured, so I'm doing it early.
Okay, cool.
So that's fine, because remember the physical standby is an exact copy of the primary. So the control file on the standby side will be an exact copy of what we have at the moment. And I want to have this in place on the standby side as well when it gets built.
Perfect. Thanks.
Cool. Sorry, should have done that. Okay, so our password file exists inside of ASM. It's a best practice these days going forward, as does the SP file. Password file we will copy out of ASM. Okay, with that command, you're basically just doing a CP of the password file to that location on the file system. And then this is just a straightforward SCP of the password file to my standby host. And I'm putting it on file system for the time being in Article Home DBS with the format that is expected at this point in time. Okay, you can actually copy directly from one ASM instance to another ASM instance, but I've decided not to do that because there's an additional step that is included if you go that route. Okay, so I've shown you guys the TNS names.autoalias, and now we need to do the parameter file. Okay. Right, I'm just going to take some of these SGA preserved parameters out of the equation. We don't need those right now. The underscore parameters I'm leaving, those are configured on OCI by default. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a quick search and replace, because I want to replace all entries of SAOUG CPT to SAOUG JHP. Okay, and the other thing that I need to change is the disk group. Oops. Right. Because we're using ASM and article managed files, I'm also going to be doing this. So I'm just going to specify the disk group name. Okay, and that should be that. It's important to note as well, your DB name stays the same, okay? If you have 5 standby databases with a primary database, so 6 in total, your DB name for each of those will remain the same. They have to be the same. The DB ID is going to be the same as well. What is going to change across each one of those is the unique name. Okay, so that's important to remember. Right, so we've got our P file set up. It's already been modified. So we're going to copy it to our standby host. And then we can get cracking with Hotman. So we are now on our JHB host. And we're going to do a startup no mount of our parameter file that I just copied over.
And we just got one question while you're busy with that startup.
Sure.
From Siska, it's on the chat. She's asking, fail server and fail client, does this not need to be changed? I'll leave that to you to answer.
Actually, that's a good point. Thank you. Only one of those would have been changed. I need to update it for the second one.
Okay.
Okay, so this one is going to change to CPT. Thank you for catching that.
So guys, I really like how it's going. I think, you know, it's interactive and we should keep it that way. And if anyone got tips and techniques, please do share it with us.
Always. Okay, so we've done the startup no mount. I actually need to restart this now because I've made that parameter change. Let's just do that. So startup force implicitly does a shutdown abort and a startup in the same breath. Okay, and now we're just restoring our standby control file. You'll see this is from service, SAOUG CPT. Oh, this is one thing that I didn't show you guys.
Ian, you don't have a load balancer here, am I right? There's a question about load balance. Okay, so
no, there's no load balancer here.
We don't have a load balancer currently, but yeah, you can set up load balancing if you want to, but this is mainly for disaster recovery. Yeah,
so DataGuard is not for balancing workload because you're not running in an active configuration. You can, and I'm saying this quote unquote load balance by having DataGuard in read-only mode while redo is being applied. Obviously, that's a licensable option called Active DataGuard. And you can then have queries or batch reports or whatever the case may be running off your standby database. So you can load balance in that sense, but it's not load balancing when you're talking about application servers. So I just wanted to show you guys as well. So this is my TNS names file. I've got an entry for each distinct database in the configuration. Okay. So when I say restore from service, that's what I'm referring to over here. When it says restore standby control file from service, SAOUG CPT, it refers to the TNS names entry. Okay, so that's gone and created my control files. And you'll notice in the parameter file, I originally only specified the disk group names because we're using Oracle managed files. It automatically goes and specifies the unique name, the type of file because it knows what the kind of file is, and then assigns a name to that file. Okay, so that's, for me, that's a huge advantage of Oracle managed files. Just specify the disk group name and forget about it. Okay, I just need to do a little bit of copy and paste. Okay, let's go and edit our parameter file. We are going to change that. Okay, back into RMAN. And now we are at a stage where we can create the SP file inside of ASM, okay, from our parameter file. I just need to check that because we're not using SRVCTL just yet to start up. Okay, so that init.auto, which will be read at the moment, will refer to the SP file that's in our ASM disk group. Okay. We're doing a startup force mount now. We've got our control files on the other side, standby control files on the other side. Mounting it will open those control files so that when we do the restore of the actual data files, the control file will be updated accordingly. Cool. So the command we issue is restore database from service, SAOUG CPT. When I configured RMAN, I configured it with parallelism of 4. Okay, so that's why we've got the 4 channels assigned. This isn't the largest database. It's only about probably 8 gigs in total. So the copy of all of the data files from the primary to the standby should take about a minute. If you are building standbys for large databases, again, it depends on the version that you're on, but I think if you're on 12.1, you should be covered with using the section size clause that's available with RMAN. Believe it or not, I've actually built a standby database for a 300 terabyte environment running on Exadata with the 2 data centers located about 25 Ks apart from each other. And we've got big file table spaces. Well, we had big file table spaces in that database. So we used the section size of 32 gigs. And for about 300 terabytes, it took about 24 hours to run the command, which is not bad if you consider the size overall. Okay, and for all intents and purposes now, we have our standby database built. So let's just do a check. Whoops, sorry, wrong window. Okay, so you might see over here, there's a little nuance where it says restoring data file to SAOUG CPT, okay? No need for concern because we've got our DB create file test parameter set correctly. It actually knows where to go and place the file. So DB unique name has been set correctly to this on the side, and we are in the right location. Okay, the next step we need to do is I just need to clear the log files because the log files in the control file are still referencing the old location. Okay, so I'm just gonna run that. Okay, that's fine. Actually, let me run my script again. Okay, so now we add Rico, JHB, SAOUG, JHB. We are ready with that step. One thing I just want to do is I want to put the password file into ASM. And this is just doing the reverse of what we did before on the primary. So we're copying it from file system into ASM. Okay, so because we're running grid infrastructure, we need to add this as a resource in the cluster registry. And there's a couple of reasons for this as well. Again, there's a benefit to upgrading to the latest versions. If I recall correctly, lower than 12.1, you actually needed to have a static entry in your listener.auto file if you planned to use the broker. From 12.1 and higher, that all gets coordinated via grid infrastructure. Okay, so again, one of those things about making life a little bit easier. So I need to add an entry for this database into grid infrastructure, into the cluster registry. The name is going to be the unique name, article home. It is a single instance environment. The DB name is SAOUG. Those are the disk groups that the database has available to it. The role is physical standby. You'll see we specify that. we have a path to the SP file, we have a path to the password file, and when this environment starts up, it needs to start up in mount mode. I also just need to add an environment variable that needs to be configured for that environment. And that's because we're running on OCI. By default, all databases use transparent data encryption when you're talking about OCI. So that's one of the mechanisms that we use to assure customers moving into the cloud that your data will be protected. Oops. So I'm just going to do a shutdown from SQL+. I always have to tell my daughter patience is a virtue. Sometimes I'm impatient and I want to get going. Okay, and then we're just going to start up the database with srvctl so that the cluster is aware of it and it's aware of the state of the database. The environment's been set correctly so that our wallet is going to be found when we start up, and when the redo apply services start, wallet will be opened up. Okay, and the database has been started up. So if we go and look at it now, we'll see our open mode is mounted. Okay, database role, physical standby. Force logging is on. We'll enable flashback at a later stage. Okay, back on the primary, we are now going to add the service that I spoke about. Okay, so we're adding the service to our database. That's the name of the service. It is attached to PDB1 because I've got a pluggable database configured. And these are parameters which you optionally can also have in a TNS names file that specifies some of the failover or the transparent application failover related parameters. My preference has always been to have this at a service level because it just makes it easier from a management point of view. If you're not using Connection Manager and all your clients and applications are using TNS names file, if you need to change this for whatever reason, it's easier to change it at one place instead of having to update everybody's TNS names files. Okay, and then I'm just going to start that service. And I need to do the same on, actually, one thing that's important here is that. Okay, so this service will only be active when the role of the database associated to it is primary. So that's how we are going to make sure that from a connectivity point of view, it's seamless to our clients. We don't need to go and update TNS names files or any of those sorts of entries. We can just get going straight away. Right, we are almost at the end. The last thing we need to do is we need to configure the broker. Okay, not exactly the last thing, but we're almost there. Okay, so that just sets our broker config file locations. Okay, I've got them in separate disk groups. And this sets the parameter which actually starts the DataGuard broker in the background and all of the other associated broker processes. We need to do the same on this side as well. Okay. I've got another script over here called setup DG. Okay, so this is just going to create the configuration with the primary database up front. It's then going to add the standby database and enable the configuration. And it's just going to edit these connection strings, and these are OCI specific. Normally, you wouldn't need to do that. Another suggestion, another recommendation is when you are launching the broker, you can connect using operating system authentication. It is suggested, though, to connect using named credentials, username and password credential, or if you're using a wallet. because a lot of the interaction with the broker is done over SQLnet. So let's just copy my password in there. And then we can run that. Okay, it's created our configuration. It's added the database. It's busy enabling the broker and the configuration at the moment. Oops, JHP. Okay, so one thing that you'll see over here is there's a lot of alter system set commands that have been executed. That's actually the broker operating in the background. So the broker goes and configures certain parameters as needed, and then attempts to start managed recovery process, your MRP. Okay, so that's got the configuration enabled. It's gone and updated those parameters. And this is an indication that we are now pretty much getting ready to pull the information over to the standby database and start apply. So if we do a show configuration on this side, okay, it says apply lag could not be determined, but that's fine. I've got very small shapes. So from a cloud point of view, you obviously have shapes when you're talking about virtual machines in the cloud. I don't have a lot of CPU assigned to this, obviously from a demonstration point of view. So it's going to take a minute or two for this to actually update correctly. Okay, while that is going, I'm just going to fire up Swingbench. Swingbench is just a tool that's been written by one of the article guys for load testing, but it's actually quite useful in demonstration, for demonstration purposes such as this. Okay, let's have a look at our configuration again. Here we go, success. Okay. And from this point of view, you can go and do show database SAOUG JHB. You can see that's our current transport lag, our apply lag, your average apply rate, etc., etc. So essentially what you want to do is before you do a switchover, ideally this should obviously show the green light, right? Again, from 12.1 and higher, the broker's been enhanced so that you can do commands such as validate database. Okay, so it goes and shows you whether or not the environment is ready for switchover. We can do this on the standby database as well. It always shows an issue with the standby redo logs, but I know that it's fine. Okay, I'm just cognizant of time. I know we have 10 minutes left.
Just with regards to time, let's try to finish off by 5:02, and we allow 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, cool. I'm almost there. Right, so we can see here, as I mentioned, it's got a little bit of, I need to go and double check to see if this is a fault or a bug or how we can actually rectify this. But the important part over here is it says ready for switchover, right? Okay, that's our database in the other availability domain, or our database in this example that's located in Johannesburg. Right, so what I've done, if we just go out of here, and let me drag this window over to the side. Okay, so this is Swingbench. It's written by one of my colleagues in an article called Dominic Giles. It's been around for quite a while. So like I said, it's a load testing tool. And we are basically simulating workload on the database at the moment, okay? So I'm just allowing it a little bit of time to warm up. We can see the column at the top is our aggregated transactions per minute, this in red. The orange is a little bit more granular transactions per second, and then the response time, which is your 5-second moving average. Okay, so while this ramps up, I'm going to go back here. And I just need to find my password, which is so super secure. I don't want anybody to see it. Okay, so I'm just going to do another show configuration that shows success. Let us do a switch over to SAOUG JHB. So now we are effecting a role reversal. Okay, and we are telling the broker that I want to now change, and my Cape Town database is going to be the standby database, and Johannesburg is going to be primary. So this is the advantage of actually using the broker, because you can do this with SQL commands, but whereas I'm initiating the switch over from one location with one command, with SQL, you need to do this, I would guess, I haven't actually checked it myself, but it's something like 3 to 5 commands that you need to run on the one side, and then you need to run different commands on the other side. So doing it with the broker, a lot simpler, a lot easier, and a lot more tolerant as well. So let's go through all of the steps here. It says performing switchover now. Operation requires a connection to the remote database, and that's why I say connect with username and password, okay, because we're going to use SQL Net. It's connected to that environment. New primary database, SAOUG is opening. And again, using grid infrastructure, this is important because now it's saying Oracle Clusterware is restarting the CPT database. Grid infrastructure also takes care of the service. So before you were running, I think it's 11.2 or 12, you actually needed to have a logon trigger in your database to check at startup, is my database role primary or standby? If it's primary, then start up the service. If it's standby, don't start it up. Okay, switchover succeeded. New primary is SAOUG GHB. Let's have a look at Swingbench here quickly. Okay, so we can see this period of time here from 10:48 to, let's call it 10:53. Let's call it 10:54, so about 6 minutes. That's where we didn't have our application connecting to the database because we were busy with the switchover operation. But there were no changes to the application. The application resumed and started up transparently. Well, not transparently, it started up when the service and the JHB environment became available for use, and processing just continued as per normal. So that in effect is how you would set up a DataGuard environment for HA. You need to have the service name in your TNS names file. All of the DataGuard servers in the configuration need to be included as well. And then highly recommend use of the broker. Simplifies your management and administration of the environment. If we go and do a show configuration, it's showing a warning here, but again, yeah, this is my VM shape, right? So that's probably why it's saying yeah, apply lag could not be determined. Here it says success. So that's fine. Let's see if this is updated. Whoops. What am I doing here? There we go. Okay, so this is still showing warning, but it will update because over here we can see at the database itself, we've got a transport lag of 0, we've got an apply lag of 0. The apply is going, the database status is success. So that is it from me, everybody.
Thank you, Ian. On the dot at 5:02.
It was well rehearsed. I spent all week practicing.
Sorry about that, man.
It's all good. Got to be better prepared, right?
Are asking Ian for the recording. So the recording will be available on our website, on the South African Oracle User Group website. We thank Ian for his time. He showed us exactly how to set up a DataGuard environment. If I can just spend 1 minute on as a DBA, and if you're running production databases, I think there is no question asked that you should be running Oracle DataGuard. I've been to multiple customers and friends to assist them during disaster recoveries. And after I left, we set up DataGuard for them. And today I haven't received any calls from those people. The reason being is I know they got DataGuard running. I also use DataGuard for a lot of EBS customers to do the cloning, so they don't have to shut down the production system. And also I'll get the junior team, our juniors, to learn DataGuard, and they can do all the operations of cloning, database replication, if you don't want them to use RMAN. But finally, Ian, you got 2 minutes. Anything you want to say? A huge thank you from us. It was excellent. Anything from your side? You just want to give your comments?
No, look, it's always my pleasure. And I mean, to everybody on the call, as Ahmed said, we're trying to engage and expand the knowledge sharing and the learning. So please feel free if there are any topics that you'd like to have covered, just send them through to Ahmed. That also helps in terms of planning the next sessions to give us an idea of what we're trying to achieve. Yeah, no, that's it from my side. If anybody else has any other questions on the chat, by all means, please feel free to fire through for the next minute or two.
Okay, I've just been getting a lot of thank yous on the chat.
I'm having a look at it as well, yeah.
So thank you.
Just one other comment. So the one thing that I will say is, like I said earlier in the session, a lot of people will enable storage-based replication for disaster recovery and forget about it. Whether or not you test the processes, that's great, because every business should be testing your business continuity planning, right? But I know for a fact, with systems that I've worked with in the past, there's a lot of interaction with different teams. So either you need the storage team involved, you need the system administrators involved, you need the DBAs involved. So there's a lot of hooks in that process. With DataGuard, it's really just with the DBA. If you guys are really brave, if your organization is really brave, you could enable a functionality called the observer, which actually takes care of that orchestration so that you don't need any human intervention. It'll actually initiate a failover. It doesn't take care of switchover operations, but it handles failover operations. I know that a lot of organizations are still very much, no, we want somebody, a human being, to actually go and check to see if everything is okay, and that's fine. But know that the technology is there to ensure that your business continues operating in the event of a disaster. With DataGuard, you can hook OEM into it, you can get notification, you can get alerts to say when your apply lag or your transport lag is behind. So there's a lot more reassurance and assurance that your disaster recovery strategy is intact.
Okay, guys, we're on time, finishing at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much. Just to give you guys all a brief, in 2 weeks' time, we got another product expert who's going to speak to us about zero data loss. And it's a training session again. And please do join us. This recording will be available on the South African Oracle User Group website. It's saoug.co.za. Thank you very much, and bye-bye from us all. And a huge thanks to Ian.
Cool. Cheers, folks. Stay safe.